I could smell the station before I saw it. Diesel and hot metal, damp canvas and coffee burnt down to a bitter slick at the bottom of a pot. The big bay doors were up, swallowing the afternoon light, and the trucks sat inside like sleeping animals, coiled power under polished red hides. A fan squeaked somewhere overhead. Laughter rose and fell in a rhythm I didn't recognize yet. I stood there a second too long with my duffel on my shoulder, a rookie poised at the edge of something older and larger than himself, trying to breathe like I belonged. "Rookie?" A voice called, not unkind, just testing the word in the air. I lowered the duffel. "Noah. Reporting for Station 47. A guy in a faded department t-shirt, broad grin, crow's feet etched deep, stuck out his hand. "Cole. Welcome to the zoo." He jerked his chin toward the rig closest to the door. "Ladders mean, engines jealous, medic units temperamental. You'll learn their moods." It was a joke, but the way he said it made me glance at the truck like it might actually be listening. Around us, boots thumped on concrete. Radios crackled. Someone cursed gently at a jammed locker. The camaraderie felt like the hum inside a transformer, warm, charged, and ready to bite anyone who didn't respect it. I wanted in. I wanted the hum to recognize me. He walked me past the racks. Turnout gear hanging like spare skins, helmets lined up like a row of stoic faces. The names and tape above each set felt like a promise I hadn't earned yet. He pointed out the watch desk, the glassed-in office, the weight room where a pair of firefighters were benching in comfortable silence. Through a doorway I saw the kitchen. Steel counters, a scarred wooden table, an old calendar with a dog-eared picture of a mountain that didn't look like anywhere near here. "Chief'll do your paperwork. Try not to sweat on the forms," Cole said, and grinned again before leaving me at a closed door with frosted glass. "Fire chief." I knocked. The voice that told me to enter was low, steady, like a hose line charged and ready. Inside, maps climbed the walls. The desk was orderly but used. Pen grooves, a chipped mug with a black ring at the bottom, a stack of incident reports squared to the table's edge. He was standing at the file cabinet, flipping through folders with a hand that had the kind of scars you don't get from clumsiness. Mid-40s, hair close-cropped, shoulders that seemed to steady the room just by existing. He turned, and I met his eyes. Marcus Hale didn't need the badge to say he was in charge. It was in the economy of his movements, in the way his gaze took me in like I was a puzzle he didn't mind solving. Not suspicious, not soft, just exact. When he offered his hand, I had the stupid thought that it was like gripping the side of a truck. Firm, textured, the kind of strength built by purpose. "Noah," he said, and my name sounded like a decision. "You ready to work?" "Yes, sir." My voice came out steady. I was proud of that. He nodded once, then gestured to a chair. We went through the forms, the policies, the way Station 47 did things. It wasn't a speech. It was a blueprint delivered in sentences that had been sanded down by repetition and care. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. When he spoke about fire behavior, his hands moved unconsciously, tracing lines of heat up through rafters, along the undersides of staircases. I watched those hands. I shouldn't have, but I did. He caught me looking once, just once, and his mouth flickered like he might smile. He didn't. "Questions?" "Only one," I said. "Where do you want me?" "Where you listen," he said, and then, after a beat, "Engine today. Drills first. You'll ride the line when I say you're ready. Not a minute before." I nodded so hard I probably looked ridiculous. He didn't seem to mind. He stood, the meeting already a memory, and the moment became the job again. Outside the door, the station swallowed us back up. The afternoon turned into drills. Hose stretches, coupling and uncoupling until my palms smarted. Ladders shouldered and thrown, the metal biting into my traps. Cole barked tips from somewhere behind me. A medic named Tasha corrected my grip with a knuckle to my wrist, precise and unembarrassed. Sweat ran down my spine. I tasted rubber and dust. Every now and then I'd feel the air shift and look up to find the chief at the edge of the bay, arms crossed, watching the way a carpenter watches a new hand with a saw, aware of what can go wrong, aware of what could go right. The first time our eyes met, it felt like getting checked for a pulse, professional, quick, necessary. The second time, it lingered a shade too long. I told myself it was my imagination. Authority looks like attention. Attention can feel like something else if you're hungry enough to be seen. By evening, my shoulders were jelly. In the kitchen, dinner was a loud miracle of spaghetti and garlic bread. A pot the size of a child's bathtub simmering, while Cole told an improbable story about a cat that refused to be rescued until it had bitten 3 different firefighters. People laughed. Someone flung a napkin. I laughed too, grateful to be in the splash zone of their ease, learning the geography of jokes that had been born in fire and cooled in coffee. Marcus came in late to dinner, nodded to the table, took a plate without ceremony. The chatter dipped a fraction and then returned to its usual volume. He ate standing, one hand on the counter, reading a report. The fluorescent lights made a halo on his close-cropped hair. At some point he looked up, and, God help me, he was looking right at me, not through me, at me. I felt my face heat. His eyes didn't move, and then they did. Just a blink, a small surrender to ordinary gravity. He set the report down like it weighed an ounce and a ton at the same time. The tones dropped halfway through dessert. The strange how sound can put the world into a single color. Red all at once. We moved before we thought. Plates abandoned, chairs scraping, bodies finding their assigned places by muscle memory I didn't have yet but pretended I did. Residential smoke, possible kitchen fire, the dispatcher said, and adrenaline painted the edges of my vision bright. The engine roared awake under me. The siren was a language and we were speaking it. I stared at the chief's profile from the jump seat reflection. Jaw set, a tiny white scar at his temple that looked like a forgotten word. The city blurred into a corridor of red light beats. I breathed with the truck. I tried to count it like breaths during a sprint. In, out, in, out. Calm was a skill here. So was speed. We pulled in behind ladder. Single story. Smoke feathering out of a cracked window. A neighbor waving and useless. Smell of grease and something sweeter. We tumbled out, chaos choreographed. Engine, line to the door, someone shouted, and my body did what we drilled. Flake, charge, shoulder the snake of it and feel it try to pull you back. My heart was so loud I could barely hear my own name. Mask up, Cole barked. You're with me. Air tasted like plastic and tin. The house turned into a maze, low visibility. Every shadow a story it didn't want to tell you. We followed the heat. Left-hand search, kitchen ahead, hiss of a pan that had gone wrong and then gone vindictive. We killed the flame quick, steam biting our necks where the gear didn't cover. It should have been simple. Something cracked above us. Ceiling, Cole said, and before the word finished being the word, a joist made a sound like a bone biting down. I didn't think. I straightened to look. That was my mistake. The beam let go of whatever had been holding it up. The world lurched. Weight and wood and the sudden knowledge that consequences come quickly. I would have been pinned if a hand hadn't grabbed my harness and yanked me back so hard my teeth clicked. The beam hit where I'd been standing a heartbeat ago. Splinters sprayed like a handful of thrown nails. The hand kept moving until I was against a solid body. My shoulder tucked under something that refused to break. Stay down, the voice said through the mask. The radio distortion unable to hide the specific sound of it. Marcus, you stay down, Noah. Felt like a command and a prayer. We crouched there in a little carved-out space that smelled like wet wood and the whisper of what if. Cole swore softly, checking my legs with quick, practiced touches. You good? Yeah, I said, dizzy with how narrowly I was telling the truth. Marcus's gloved hand stayed a fraction longer than necessary on my shoulder. Then it was gone, replaced by the exact sequence of orders the scene needed. The beam shored, the ceiling checked, the hot spots blacked out. The neighbor told a calm story of safety that made an almost fire sound like a small and solvable thing. But that extra second of contact burned like a brand under all the gear, somewhere not visible but very much there. Outside, the night had cooled to that particular blue that happens after a scare. People stand closer together in that light. The neighbor cried and then laughed and then cried again while Tasha checked her blood pressure and told her she was okay. We rolled hose in loops that felt like finishing a chapter. Steam rose from the street and made halos out of the streetlights. "Rookie," Cole said, and thumped my back where the air bottle wouldn't bruise. "You earned your spaghetti." "Almost earned a tombstone," another guy said, but he was smiling when he said it, and the words were the kind that defanged themselves. I laughed because everyone laughed, and then the laughter dissolved into the kind of quiet a siren knows how to make. Relieved, exhausted, present. I felt him before I saw him. Marcus stepped into my peripheral vision and then into my space. Without the mask, his face looked older around the eyes, like the night had pressed its thumb into the corners. "You okay?" he asked, and for a second the question sounded like it mattered to him personally more than it did to the paperwork. "I'm good." My voice surprised me by being soft. He scanned my face, my gear, the place where the beam had missed by inches, and then something unreadable crossed his eyes, the kind of expression that would be nothing if it were on anyone else. On him, it registered like weather changing. He nodded once. "Watch the ceilings," he said, and then lower, meant only for me. "Watch me." The world should have been noisy with wrap-up, with radios and laughter and the hydraulics of the ladder. But that sentence found a quiet part of me and sat down there. Felt like a lesson. Felt like a promise. Felt like something I didn't have a name for yet. On the ride back, the city returned to us in vertical slices. Stoplights, convenience stores, someone walking a dog who looked astonished by the engine's size. The adrenaline faded and left awareness behind. Every bump in the road moved through the chassis, through the bench, up my spine. I stared at the image of us in the window, a rookie behind a chief, two outlines in red. I told myself the look he'd given me outside was professional. I told myself his hand on my harness had been the hand he would put on any of his people. I told myself a lot of things that were probably mostly true. Back at the station, we stowed gear in the slow, ritual ways that keep you from noticing your hands are still shaking. My turnout coat hung heavier than before, as if it had absorbed a fraction of the night's weight. Cole dissected the call in the kitchen like a coach after a game, turning it into lessons. Good nozzle control, watch reactive ceilings, don't crane your neck. People drifted away to showers, to the TV, to the bunks where sleep came in short, careful increments. I sat at the edge of my bunk and unlaced my boots. The concrete floor was cool under my arches. The station sighed around me, metal popping as it cooled, a truck ticking like a big clock. Through the crack of the dorm door I could see the office light. The chief, alone, finishing paperwork. I should have been tired enough to collapse. Instead, I felt like I'd been rewired to a higher voltage and no one had told the lights to dim. He came out after a while, the overheads already off, the bay washed in the sodium glow from the street. He paused a step when he saw me sitting there, then kept going, footsteps quiet. When he reached the end of the bay he looked back, a small thing, a simple check like he was counting apparatus. For a beat our eyes found each other again across the silver of the floor. There was nothing to that moment. There was everything to that moment. I got under the thin station blanket and stared at the underside of the bunk above me. The grain of the plywood like a map I didn't know how to read. The night settled. My body replayed the yank of his hand, the firmness of it, the way my name had sounded through his mask. I told myself it was adrenaline echo. I told myself it would fade. It didn't, not right away. It turned over in my chest like an ember finding air, small and insistent. Maybe it was the smoke or maybe it was him, but something that night started burning inside me. The weeks bled together, each one marked by drills, alarms, and the constant smell of smoke that never quite left my skin. I stopped counting bruises. They were just the punctuation of progress. What I did count, though, were the moments when Chief Hale's voice softened, only when the others weren't around. He'd walk the line during training, boots echoing across the bay floor, eyes scanning every movement. "Lower, Noah," he'd say, and his hand would find the small of my back to push me a little closer to the ground. It wasn't lingering, not really, but the warmth of it stayed longer than it should have. When other firefighters were near, his tone switched back to iron, precise, distant, the kind of authority that left no room for misunderstanding. But when it was just us, There was something unspoken. Pause between words. A hesitation at the doorway, like he had one more thing to say and never did. The locker room was the hardest place to lie to myself. The clang of lockers, the hiss of showers, the way laughter bounced off tile. It all blurred together until the only thing that felt real was the weight of his gaze when he thought I wasn't looking. Once, as I peeled off my sweat-soaked t-shirt, I caught his reflection in the metal door across the room. He was at his locker, changing from his uniform shirt to a plain black one, but his eyes flicked up, just for a second. They met mine in the mirror before either of us looked away. It was nothing. It was everything. I told myself I was imagining it, that heat does strange things to the brain. Still, my hands shook when I tied my boots. We were short-staffed one Friday evening, so the chief ran drills himself. The others had clocked out, promising beer and bad karaoke downtown, but Marcus stayed behind, insisting the rigs needed another inspection. I volunteered to help. I told myself it was dedication. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe both. By 9, the station was quiet, the city outside wrapped in siren-dampened dark. I was coiling hose lines when I heard him behind me. "Still here?" he asked. "Could say the same, Chief." My voice tried for casual, failed halfway through. He chuckled. A small, surprised sound I hadn't heard before. "Marcus, when it's just us." The words landed heavier than they should have. When it's just us. I nodded, because speaking might have broken something fragile in the air between us. He helped me hang the hoses, his hands brushing mine once. My pulse jumped. He didn't comment, didn't move away either. When we finished, he said, "You've got drive. Most rookies burn out before week 3. I'm still here." I noticed. It was the closest thing to a compliment I'd ever heard from him. Then he said, almost too quietly, "Coffee." I thought he meant a pot in the kitchen, but he gestured toward his office. The lights were low inside, just the desk lamp spilling a warm pool over stacks of reports. He poured from a thermos, 2 chipped mugs that didn't match, the kind you find in stations older than the people working them. I sat across from him, gear jacket folded over my lap like a shield. For a while we just drank, the hum of the old fridge filling the silence. Then he asked, "You scared yet?" "Of what?" He looked up. "Fire." "It's not a trick question." "Every time," I said. "But I guess that's the point." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Good answer. Fear keeps you sharp. Too much of it and you freeze. Too little and you die." He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. The lamplight caught the lines around his eyes, softened them. "You think you can get used to this life, Noah?" "I'm trying to." He nodded slowly. "It'll take everything from you if you let it." I let it once. His gaze drifted past me, somewhere I couldn't see. "Never married. Figured I'd do it later." Then later never showed up. Too much fire and not enough time. Something in his tone hollowed out the room. I wanted to ask what he'd lost, who he'd loved, but his face had gone still again, the professional mask closing over raw memory. I knew better than to pry. "Still," I said, "you don't seem like someone who regrets much." "That's the trick," he said, mouth curving wryly. "Regret looks a lot like discipline when you polish it long enough." We both laughed, quiet, uncertain, the kind of laugh that hides confession. I noticed then how the lamplight cut a gold edge along his jaw, how the shadows deepened the blue in his eyes. He was still in his uniform pants, suspenders hanging loose. His forearms were bare, dusted with the faint soot of drills. Everything about him looked carved from work and silence. "Sometimes," he said after a while, "it's the loneliness that kills more than the fire." I swallowed, my throat tight. "You mean being the one who has to stay strong for everyone else?" "Something like that." His eyes found mine again. The air felt different, denser, charged with the static of something we weren't allowed to name. I wanted to look away but didn't. He didn't either. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then he stood, breaking the spell with a scrape of the chair. "You should get some sleep," he said, his voice rougher than before. "You've got morning drills." "Yeah," I said, standing too quickly, coffee sloshing in the cup. I set it down before I made a bigger mess. At the doorway, I hesitated. He was still at the desk, pretending to read a file, but his eyes weren't moving over the page. I opened my mouth. Thank you. Good night. Something safe. But the words tangled somewhere between thought and sound. He looked up then, and the look he gave me wasn't the look of a chief. It was a man caught between instinct and rule, between want and consequence. Good night, Noah, he said finally. I nodded, turned, forced my legs to move. The corridor back to the dorms felt longer than usual, lined with echoes. I could still feel his eyes on me, the way his voice had softened when he said my name. I told myself I was imagining it, that tension and fatigue were cruel liars. But my heartbeat, steady and insistent against my ribs, told me otherwise. When I reached my bunk, I sat for a long time in the dark, still tasting the bitter coffee, still hearing his voice. Somewhere deep inside, a line had shifted, thin, invisible but real. And though we hadn't crossed it, I knew we were both standing on its edge. He said good night, but his eyes said something else entirely. The call came just after midnight. A warehouse off the highway, flames reported through the roof. The kind of fire that makes even veterans tighten their straps twice. The air outside was wet and heavy, carrying the faint scent of burning rubber long before we reached the site. As the siren cut through the night, I caught Marcus's reflection in the windshield. Jaw clenched, eyes fixed forward. He looked carved out of determination. By the time we arrived, the sky was bleeding orange. The building loomed ahead like a furnace, windows shattered, the metal siding shimmering with heat. We could hear the groan of collapsing steel even over the engine's roar. Someone was shouting about trapped workers inside, the kind of rumor that turns hesitation into suicide missions. Team 2, ventilation. Team 1, interior attack. Noah, you're with Cole, Marcus ordered, his voice clear through the static of the radio. Then softer, almost just for me. Stay behind him. Always behind him. I nodded. He caught my eye for half a second, nothing more. But there was something there, something that made me want to make him proud. Inside, the world dissolved into noise and color. Smoke hugged the ceiling like a living thing, shifting with every movement of air. The heat pushed down on us, thick and angry. Visibility was a lie. Everything beyond a few feet was a wall of black. Cole moved ahead, nozzle in hand, sweeping left and right as we advanced. I dragged the hose, feeling every pound of resistance fight me back. We found the fire's heart in the center aisle, pallets stacked high, flames devouring them like paper. Cole opened the nozzle, and the steam came fast, biting through gloves, stinging eyes. My world shrank to movement, direction, survival. Then the roof made that sound. That long, low moan I'd only ever heard in training videos. Back out. Collapse zone. Marcus's voice snapped through the radio, controlled but sharper than I'd ever heard. We turned, but the smoke had shifted, erasing our exit. Cole tried to pull me by the shoulder, but my foot caught in something. Metal rebar twisted through melted plastic. I fell hard, the hose jerking from my hands. Cole turned, shouting, but his voice was swallowed by the roar above us. A section of ceiling gave way in a shower of sparks and ash, cutting us apart with a curtain of flame. Chief, I've got one trapped. Cole's voice was a blur in my ear. Then Marcus, calm, steady, but underneath it, fear. Noah, can you hear me? I fumbled for my mic. Here. Can't see a thing. Stay low, he said, each word clipped, deliberate. You're near the south wall. Crawl toward your left. Count the racks as you pass them. I moved, one knee at a time, dragging air through my mask like it was syrup. My gloved hand brushed charred boxes, the heat seeping through. Can't find the wall. It's there, he said, voice dropping an octave, controlled, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. You're almost to it. You're doing good, kid. Keep talking to me, kid. He never called me that before. It didn't sound like command, it sounded like care. Left again, he guided. Now forward. You should feel the concrete soon. My hand hit cold stone. Relief came in a burst that hurt to feel. Got it. Good. Now crawl along it. Keep moving until you hit open air. You'll see light. Don't stop until you're out. I obeyed every word. The smoke thinned, wind pulling it toward the broken door ahead. When I stumbled into the open, the cool night air hit me like a punch. I ripped off my mask and coughed until the stars blurred. Then he was there. Marcus appeared through the haze, sprinting toward me, his gear half undone, radio still crackling at his chest. He grabbed my shoulders first, scanning me with a speed that was anything but professional. His hands checked my helmet, my jacket, then, hesitating only a second, my face. You're not burned. His voice was lower now, raw. I'm fine, I managed. My throat hurt from the smoke. He didn't seem convinced. His fingers brushed along my neck, trembling slightly, then fell away like he realized what he was doing. Cole emerged from the smoke behind me, dragging the hose. He's good, Chief. Just caught a snag. Marcus straightened instantly, snapping back into authority. Good work, both of you. But his voice was quieter than usual, like it was fighting something it couldn't name. The rest of the crew joined in, clapping shoulders, cracking jokes to cut the tension. Rookie made it through his first inferno, someone yelled. Guess he's one of us now. I forced a smile, tried to laugh, but my chest still felt tight. Less from the smoke, more from the memory of Marcus's hands shaking against my skin. By the time we packed up, dawn was breaking. The warehouse was a skeleton now, ribs of metal twisted in pink light. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a strange silence in its place. Marcus kept his distance, barking orders, talking to inspectors. But when the others weren't looking, I caught him watching me. Once he gave a small nod, not approval, not exactly. More like confirmation that I was still here. Back at the station, everyone was loud again, retelling close calls, bragging, laughing like they hadn't all been one breath away from dying. I showered, changed, pretended to join in, but my thoughts kept looping back to that radio voice guiding me through the dark. Later, when the station finally quieted, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of soap and burnt wood. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of orange, heard Marcus's voice cutting through chaos. Steady, grounding, desperate not to lose me. Keep talking to me. The words replayed like a heartbeat. He could have sent anyone in to find me. He didn't. He'd stayed by the door, giving orders, refusing to leave until I was safe. And the way he'd grabbed me afterward, there'd been something more than relief in it. Something he couldn't disguise behind rank or protocol. I turned over, restless. For weeks I'd tried to ignore what was building between us. The glances, the silences, the way his voice softened when it was just us. I told myself it was all in my head. A rookie's admiration, nothing more. But tonight, that illusion burned away like the warehouse roof. I started seeing him differently after that fire. Not as the unshakable chief who commanded every heartbeat in the room, but as a man carrying ghosts. A man who feared losing control because control was all that kept him together. Sometimes, when the station was quiet and the lights dimmed, I'd hear him pacing in his office. The door would stay closed, but his shadow moved against the frosted glass, slow, deliberate, like someone trying to walk off memories that wouldn't let go. I realized then that what drew me to him wasn't just respect. It was the recognition of something broken that matched my own. We were both trying to tame fires that lived inside us. Sleep didn't come easy that night. My body ached, but my thoughts burned hotter. Every sound from the bay below, footsteps, doors, even the hum of the generator, made me think of him, of how his hand had lingered on my shoulder, of the way he'd said my name like it mattered more than protocol. When dawn crept through the window, I still hadn't closed my eyes. I sat up, staring at the locker across the room where my gear hung drying. The soot stains would fade, the burns would heal, but that moment in the fire, his voice guiding me home, would stay. For the first time, I wanted to be more than the rookie he saved. I wanted to be the man he couldn't hide from. By the time summer rolled in, the station felt like a second skin, warm, loud, and full of eyes that noticed too much. Word had a way of spreading fast in close quarters. A glance held too long, a tone too soft, a hand on the shoulder that lingered past its purpose. All it took was one spark. Started with jokes. Cole was the first to toss it out casually during breakfast. "Careful, rookie," he said, grinning as he buttered his toast. "Keep making the chief smile like that, and he'll have you promoted to captain next week." The table laughed, harmless on the surface. But I saw the flicker of something sharp in Marcus's eyes before he looked down at his coffee. The next day, he barely looked at me during drills. The change came quiet, like a door closing. The man who'd once pulled me aside for quiet pointers now issued orders clipped and formal. "Ellis, hose line. Move. No more Noah. No small talk." He stopped coming to the kitchen after shifts, stopped lingering by the rigs when we finished up. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just busy. But the colder he got, the clearer it became. He was building walls, thick ones. And every brick he laid hurt more than the one before. I'd catch him watching me from his office sometimes, like he wanted to speak but couldn't trust himself to. I started making mistakes, small ones born from distraction. He corrected me with that same sharp professionalism, but his voice would falter just slightly, like he hated hearing himself sound that way. The others didn't notice the tension for what it was. To them, it was just the chief coming down harder on his favorite rookie to shut the rumors up. To me, it felt like exile. The storm came on a Tuesday night, heavy and mean. The sky split open around 10, thunder shaking the station windows. The others had already been sent home early from the shift exchange, road flooding, downed lines. Just me and Marcus left, the power flickering like it couldn't decide whether to quit or not. I was half asleep on the couch when everything went dark. The hum of the lights vanished, leaving only rain and the heartbeat of distant thunder. I grabbed a flashlight, found Marcus in the bay checking the generator. He was in a t-shirt, soaked from stepping outside, hair flattened to his forehead. "Backup's dead," he muttered, running a hand through it. "Old wiring. Figures. We've got candles in the kitchen," I offered. "Want me to?" "I'll help," he said before I could finish. We found a few emergency candles and lined them along the counter, the flames flickering against steel and tile. The rain hammered the roof in waves. The world outside was a blur of water and shadow. For a while we didn't talk. He poured coffee, black as the night outside, and leaned against the counter opposite me. The candlelight made him look softer, younger, though the shadows beneath his eyes said otherwise. "I heard what they've been saying," he said finally. His voice was low, not angry, just tired. I'd catch him watching me from his office sometimes, like he wanted to speak but couldn't trust himself to. I started making mistakes, small ones born from distraction. He corrected me with that same sharp professionalism, but his voice would falter just slightly, like he hated hearing himself sound that way. The others didn't notice the tension for what it was. To them, it was just the chief coming down harder on his favorite rookie to shut the rumors up. To me, it felt like exile. The storm came on a Tuesday night, heavy and mean. The sky split open around 10, thunder shaking the station windows. The others had already been sent home early from the shift exchange, road flooding, downed lines. Just me and Marcus left, the power flickering like it couldn't decide whether to quit or not. I was half asleep on the couch when everything went dark. The hum of the lights vanished, leaving only rain and the heartbeat of distant thunder. I grabbed a flashlight, found Marcus in the bay checking the generator. He was in a t-shirt, soaked from stepping outside, hair flattened to his forehead. "Backup's dead," he muttered, running a hand through it. "Old wiring. Figures. We've got candles in the kitchen," I offered. "Want me to?" "I'll help," he said before I could finish. We found a few emergency candles and lined them along the counter, the flames flickering against steel and tile. The rain hammered the roof in waves. The world outside was a blur of water and shadow. For a while we didn't talk. He poured coffee, black as the night outside, and leaned against the counter opposite me. The candlelight made him look softer, younger, though the shadows beneath his eyes said otherwise. "I heard what they've been saying," he said finally. His voice was low, not angry, just tired. I froze, staring into my mug. Doesn't matter. It does. He set his cup down, the clink echoing. They think I play favorites. That's on me. I shook my head. You don't. He gave a dry laugh. I do. I've tried not to, but I do. My chest tightened. Marcus. He held up a hand, cutting me off but not unkindly. You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who thought fire couldn't touch him either. I leaned forward. A friend. His eyes flicked toward the flame. Partner. We came up together. He was fearless. Too fearless. Ran into a backdraft on a warehouse call 10 years ago. Didn't make it. The words landed heavy between us. His voice cracked just slightly on the last syllable. I was supposed to go in first, he said after a beat. Told him to wait for my signal. He didn't. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't. Not yet. And you think that's me? You've got his same damn fire, he said, looking at me then, really looking. Same eyes when you run into smoke. Like you're chasing something you can't explain. Maybe I am, I whispered. He exhaled. Slow. You scare me sometimes, Noah. Why? Because I know what losing someone like you feels like. The air went still. The rain kept falling, relentless, but it sounded far away. His confession cracked something open in both of us. I could see it. The war behind his calm exterior, the grief he'd been polishing into discipline all these years. I stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath my boots. I'm not him, I said softly. I know, he murmured. That's what makes it worse. The distance between us was a breath now. The candles hissed faintly in the draft, their light trembling like it couldn't bear to witness what was happening. He reached up, almost without realizing it, his fingers brushing a wet strand of hair off my forehead. The touch was careful, reverent. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. Marcus, I said, and his name felt dangerous in my mouth. He didn't move away. The air between us pulsed, electric with everything unsaid. I could smell the rain on him, the faint trace of smoke that never left his clothes. His hand lingered near my cheek, trembling slightly. I should have stepped back. I didn't. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back to my eyes. The moment stretched thin, fragile, seconds away from breaking. Then he blinked, pulled back like he'd been burned. No, he said quietly, shaking his head. You deserve better than a scandal. I wanted to tell him I didn't care, that I'd take the risk, that he already had me, whether he wanted to or not. But the words caught somewhere behind the lump in my throat. He turned away, extinguishing one of the candles with his fingers. The room dimmed. The sound of rain filled the silence again. You should get some rest, he said, not looking at me. His voice was steady again, the chief, not the man. Storms supposed to clear by morning. I hesitated, then nodded, forcing my voice to work. Good night, Chief. He almost smiled at the title, like it hurt and comforted him at once. Good night, Noah. I walked back toward the dorms, each step heavier than the last. The storm outside matched the one in my chest. Wild, unsparing. I could still feel the ghost of his touch against my skin, still see the conflict in his eyes when he pulled away. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, lightning flickering through the windows, painting the room in brief flashes of white and gold. Every crack of thunder made my pulse jump. I thought of his voice when he said I scared him. I thought of the way he'd looked at me, torn between duty and something dangerously close to desire. The storm eventually faded, but sleep never came. I went to bed that night burning. From the storm, from his nearness, from everything unsaid. The call came at dawn, that gray, in-between light when the world hasn't decided if it wants to wake up. Dispatch said multi-vehicle collision, gas tanker involved, possible explosion. No one finished their coffee. By the time we reached the highway, the world was already on fire. The tanker had split open like a wound, flames crawling along the asphalt, cars twisted in shapes that no longer made sense. The air reeked of burning fuel and something worse. Melted rubber, scorched fabric, the metallic sting of blood. Marcus was first out of the truck, shouting orders through the radio. Ladder team perimeter. Medic, triage at the south end. Ellis with me. I followed him, heart pounding, the roar of the fire so loud it felt like a physical thing pressing on my chest. Somewhere beyond the smoke, someone was screaming. "Chief, there's a kid," Cole yelled, pointing toward an overturned minivan wedged against the guardrail. The flames were inches away, licking closer with every gust of wind. Marcus assessed the scene in a glance, the fire, the leaking gas, the collapsing metal. "We wait for foam. It's too unstable." But I could hear the crying, thin, terrified, unmistakably alive. And every part of me that remembered being saved once screamed louder than reason. "I can get to him," I said, already moving. Marcus grabbed my arm. "You don't. That's an order. I can't just stand here." "You will." His voice cracked like thunder, raw with something that wasn't anger. But I was already running. The heat hit first, a wall of it, blistering through the turnout gear. I dropped low, crawled under the twisted frame. The child was small, maybe 5, seatbelt tangled around his arm. Tears streaked down a face blackened with soot. "It's okay. I've got you," I said, cutting through the strap with my knife. "Close your eyes." The car groaned. Flames clawed closer. "Ellis." Marcus's voice burst through the radio, distorted, furious. "Get out now. I've got him." "Damn it, Noah." Something exploded behind me. Maybe a tire, maybe worse. The shockwave slammed me forward. I shielded the boy, dragging us out through the gap, lungs on fire, skin screaming. The air went white with heat. Then a shadow Marcus crashing through it. He caught the kid from my arms and shoved him toward Cole, who was sprinting in with a blanket. Then Marcus's hands were on me, hauling me backward just as another blast sent a plume of flame into the sky. We hit the ground together, rolling until the world stopped shaking. When the smoke finally thinned, we were both lying on the shoulder of the road, breathing like we'd run through hell. The child was safe. The fire was under control. But Marcus didn't look relieved. He looked wrecked. He shoved off his helmet, eyes wild. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I got him out," I rasped. "You could have died." He stood, pacing, running a hand through his soot-streaked hair. "You don't go into a live fire without backup. You don't." His voice cracked again. He turned away, fists clenching at his sides. "You think being brave makes you untouchable? You think I could watch you burn?" I didn't know what to say. The other crews were shouting orders, sirens still wailing. But for a second it was just us. Smoke curling between us like something alive. "Chief." He spun back, eyes meeting mine. "Don't call me that right now," he said, voice breaking. "Just don't." He walked off before I could answer. Back at the station, the world returned to normal rhythms. Reports, cleanup, the smell of disinfectant covering the lingering smoke. But Marcus avoided me completely. The others noticed. They assumed it was discipline. They didn't see the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. By evening, the adrenaline had burned off, leaving only exhaustion. I went to the locker room to change, the hum of the vents filling the quiet. The door slammed open behind me. "Marcus." He stood there for a second, soaked from the rain that had started outside, eyes shadowed and unreadable. Then he shut the door and locked it. "Marcus." He didn't answer. He just paced once, like he was searching for words big enough to hold whatever was tearing at him. When he finally spoke, his voice came out low, rough. "I told you to stay back. I know. You didn't listen. I couldn't." He slammed his fist against a locker, the sound sharp and final. "You could have died out there. You could have—" He stopped himself, breathing hard. "I can't lose you, Noah. Not you." The room went still. The air shifted. I stared at him. "You won't. You don't get it." He stepped closer, the rain still dripping from his hair. "I've lost people before. Men who trusted me to keep them safe. I swore I'd never." His voice cracked, the rest swallowed by the echo of the vents. I closed the distance. "Marcus," I said softly. "Look at me." He did. And whatever he'd been holding back, months of restraint, guilt, longing broke all at once. He grabbed me by the collar and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was the collision of every moment we'd buried since that first day in the smoke. His hands were still trembling, still smelling faintly of gasoline and rain. I could feel the fear in the way he kissed me. Not fear of being caught, but fear of what it meant to finally stop hiding. I kissed him back like I'd been waiting my whole life. He pulled me closer until the rest of the world disappeared. No sirens, no rank, no eyes watching. Just the sound of our breathing and the wet slide of rain against metal. When we finally broke apart, both of us were shaking. "I've felt it since day one," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Since you pulled me out of that first fire." He exhaled hard, forehead pressing against mine. "You shouldn't, but I do." His eyes searched mine, desperate and afraid, but he didn't move away this time. He just let his hand rest against my neck, thumb tracing the line of my jaw. Outside, the sirens faded into distance. Inside, the world was nothing but the hum of blood and breath. He kissed me again, slower this time, less fury, more need, a confession sealed in silence. When it ended, he didn't speak. Neither did I. There was nothing to explain, nothing to apologize for. For once, the fire wasn't outside. It was right there between us, and neither of us wanted to put it out. Morning came like punishment. The sunlight creeping through the station windows was too bright, too honest. The storm had broken overnight, leaving puddles in the parking lot and the faint smell of wet asphalt in the air. The others were back from their shifts, joking, drinking coffee, talking about the explosion on the highway as if it were another day at work. No one noticed the way Marcus avoided my eyes, or the fact that we hadn't spoken since the locker room. By the time I changed into my off-duty clothes, the whisper had already started, the kind of quiet talk that spreads faster than smoke. I caught pieces of it in the hallways. "The chief's been off lately. He's protecting Ellis again. You think there's something going on?" He must have heard them too. By mid-morning, he called a meeting in the bay. Everyone gathered, boots scuffing concrete, coffee cups in hand. Not a clue what was about to hit. Marcus stood in front of the engine, posture sharp, eyes steady. I could tell by the stiffness in his shoulders that he'd made a decision. "I'm stepping down," he said. Just like that. The room fell silent. Cole frowned. "What? Chief, you can't." "It's not up for debate," Marcus said. "The department needs someone who can focus. I can't do that right now." Someone muttered a protest. Someone else cursed. I stood frozen, my stomach dropping through the floor. He didn't look at me, not once. When the meeting broke apart in confusion, I stayed behind. He lingered at his office door, hands on his hips, staring at the desk like it might stop him from leaving. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. He turned slowly, eyes tired but kind. "Yes, I do. Because of me?" His jaw flexed. "Because of us." I didn't know what to say. There was no right argument to make. He stepped closer, voice lowering so only I could hear. "You've got a career ahead of you, Noah. Don't let my mistakes take that from you. You didn't make a mistake." He almost smiled, the kind of half-smile that never reached his eyes. "Then let's keep it that way." I wanted to reach for him. I didn't. We were still in the station, surrounded by ghosts of everything we couldn't be. When he left an hour later, no one cheered, no one clapped. Firefighters don't do goodbyes well. They just nod, shake hands, pretend it's another transfer. But when Marcus walked out into the sunlight with his duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the station felt hollow. The air itself seemed to sag. I didn't follow him. Not then. The weeks that followed moved like smoke. Thin, weightless, hard to hold on to. I threw myself into work, into drills, into anything that didn't involve thinking. Cole took over temporary command. He meant well, but every time he barked an order, I found myself listening for a voice that wasn't there. Sometimes, at night, I'd drive past the small apartment where I knew Marcus used to live. The windows were dark. I'd sit there for a while, engine running, and then go home without getting out. It felt like waiting for a fire that would never come back to life. He didn't call. I didn't either. Pride, fear, maybe both. I kept his number saved under a false name in my phone, like it mattered who I was lying to. Then, one night, 6 weeks later, the screen lit up. MH unknown number. I stared at it for a long time before answering. "Hey," his voice said, low, uncertain. I swallowed. "Hey, I'm at a new station," he said after a pause. "Small town outside Ashland. Volunteer mostly part-time. Quiet place." "That suits you," I said. He laughed softly. "Maybe. I don't know if it suits you, though. You were never built for quiet." The line went still. I could hear rain again, faint through his side of the call. It always seemed to be raining when we talked. "You didn't call to talk about Ashland," I said finally. "No," he admitted. "I just wanted to know if you're okay." "I'm breathing." "That's a start." We didn't say goodbye. The line just went silent, both of us waiting for the other to hang up. When it did, I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. 2 days later, I drove to Ashland. The town was smaller than I expected. One main street, a diner, a hardware store, a single blinking traffic light. The new firehouse sat at the edge of town, painted white instead of red. A converted barn that looked almost too peaceful to hold engines. He was outside when I pulled in, like he'd known I was coming. He was leaning against the railing, coffee in hand, wearing a faded department shirt with a patch I didn't recognize. The sun caught on his hair, a few silver strands brighter than I remembered. When he saw me, he didn't look surprised, just relieved. "Took you long enough," he said, a faint smile touching his mouth. "Traffic?" I said, and it made him laugh. That quiet, real laugh I hadn't heard in months. I climbed the steps, stopping in front of him. For the first time in weeks, the distance between us felt real. Not the miles, but the silence we'd built. He set his coffee down. "You shouldn't have come." "I know. I don't have much here. No big crews, no fancy trucks. Just this." "I'm not here for the trucks." He studied me for a long time, like he was trying to decide if he could believe what he was hearing. Then he exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping, as if he'd been carrying that breath since the day he left. "This time," he said, voice quiet but certain, "I won't hide." The words hung between us like a promise. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him, the familiar smell of coffee and smoke and something that had always meant home. He reached for my hand, not like a secret this time, but like something earned. Our fingers fit together easily, like they'd been waiting. "Ready to meet the crew?" he asked, nodding toward the door. "Ready as I'll ever be." We walked inside together, past the quiet hum of the engines, the faint smell of diesel and waxed floors. The air was different here, lighter somehow, less burdened by ghosts. For the first time since I joined the department, I didn't feel like I was proving myself. I wasn't the rookie anymore. I wasn't the kid trying to chase the approval of a man who couldn't let himself feel. I was walking beside him. The day stretched open, sunlight filtering through the wide doors, dust motes dancing like sparks in the air. Outside, somewhere far away, sirens wailed faintly. Another fire, another city, another story. I looked at Marcus, at the quiet curve of his smile, at the peace that finally settled behind his eyes. The city still burned, but this time, I wasn't fighting the flames. I was walking beside them.